So, I mentioned this report that just came out, and for those of you that haven't seen it yet, I really encourage you to check it out. It's called How the Top 50 Nonprofits Do Social Media. And it's an infographic. It talks about the top 50 nonprofits and their online presence. And in particular, I'm curious from your perspective, Claire, the report talks a lot about the biggest nonprofits, sort of by definition. I think it was the Nonprofit Times. But for the folks in the audience that aren't multi-million-dollar organizations that are working with volunteer staffs, volunteer fundraising or marketing departments, what have you seen in terms of best practices for smaller grassroots organizations and how they can leverage Twitter and Facebook?
Okay, so the two, I think, most important tips that small nonprofits can use when using Twitter and when trying to navigate the world of the Twitters are, I'm going to give them now. One, nonprofits should create a list of influencers that they're following on Twitter. So people that you think might be interested in your cause, whether they're celebrities or people like Craig Newmark or folks that could help your cause and might be interested in it, that you want to follow over time and potentially try to develop a relationship with, okay? So this is a private list. Don't show the world that you have an influencer list, and just follow these guys over time and try to develop a relationship. Number two, you should also have a private list of your donors. One of the easiest ways to use Twitter is to engage with your donors and create and deepen your relationships with them by just sending quick updates and quick Twitter posts.
Yeah, Craig?
Yeah. The deal with the study basically showed that effectiveness in social media is not related to organizational size or budget. The deal is social media means that everyone gets to participate, potentially very low cost because you're basically just passing on messages from one person or the other. And we do know that historically the most effective social media is grassroots and done on the cheap. Because not only are we seeing folks like the Occupy movement or the grassroots portions of the Tea Party, but also recently we saw people like Tom Paine or Martin Luther making very effective use of social media on the cheap for great effect.
So, one of the things that I did see Craig write in his blog was that the effective use of social media has little to do with size or funding, and that revenue does not increase a nonprofit's visibility and interaction in the social media world. So, in particular, what I thought was really interesting was YMCA was at the top of the list. They had raised about $6 million online, and they only have 200 Twitter followers. Compared to the Red Cross, which was the first organization to get on Twitter, and they've got over 500,000 followers. So I'm really curious, basically what gives, and how can nonprofits really look to leverage social media. In particular, I think part of what the Red Cross has done so well is when there's an emergency, a natural disaster, et cetera, so whether that's a funding challenge or it might not be a hurricane for everyone in the audience, but how can nonprofits leverage the sort of time sensitivity of social media really effectively?
The Red Cross is an incredible example of Twitter use, and I think the reason for that is that they've been able to identify when people are most interested in donating, and that is when there is an urgent crisis or an urgent need.
We had the Occupy Oakland demonstration, and it turned kind of violent. There were some issues with the police. As I mentioned this morning, we've also seen the Arab Spring and the uprising throughout the Middle East. I'm really curious, is this a coincidence? Would what happened in Egypt and throughout the Middle East, would what's happening with the Occupy movement be possible, in your opinion, Craig, without the advent of social media?
I think social media is how people communicate what's going on and what's next. But more importantly, social media has historically been used for people to let other people know that they're not the only ones who are concerned and who are ready to act. There's this guy, Victor Hugo, who said there's nothing so powerful as an idea whose time has come. And what people use social media for is to let other people know, hey, it's ready to actually do something. Let's get together and actually do that kind of thing. The downside is that since that's a very public kind of communications, there are bad actors who will seek to subvert a movement to make trouble. Because there's been already one guy who confessed publicly that he was attending demonstrations to stir up trouble to make the protesters look bad. This is actually a pretty old technique, agent provocateurs. So the deal is that there's a lot of upside to using social media to make a tipping point happen, but do watch out. There are bad actors out there who will make real trouble, and you do have to protect yourselves.
I think the best answer to that question I heard was from an Egyptian blogger. She was telling me that we were at the UN and we were on a panel, and she was saying, someone asked her this very question, and she had flown in from Egypt the day before and had all these, thoughts. She was the person from the ground there on the panel to share about what it was like to be in the midst of, the beginning of the Arab Spring. And she said, this would have happened, but it might not have happened so fast. And I think I really like that. We, know that social media isn't creating these revolutions by any means. These revolutions would have happened. These actors who want to change the world have always existed, and they've always used whatever tools are, at their hand to do it. And social media is the tool of now to do so. But I do think it is activating things quicker, perhaps.